Hello, here we've got another Bible story in the series that we're doing in the Old Testament. And I'm trying to remember the actions that we were doing. I wonder if you can remember them too. We started with creation, the fall, the flood, the tower, the nations scattering. 4,000 years went by. Then we have Abraham, the friend of God. And Abraham had a son called Isaac. God had promised him descendants like stars in the sky, so many. And then Isaac had the terrible twins. They really fought. There was Esau, the hairy one, and Jacob, the smooth one. And Jacob had 12 sons, and one of them was Joseph. Joseph the dreamer, Joseph the prisoner, and Joseph the ruler. 400 years went by. And then along came the king of Pharaoh who didn't remember Joseph. And so they needed to have baby Moses to rescue God's people from Egypt. And as Moses grew up, do you remember, there was the burning bush, and then the angel of death passing over the houses which had blood on the doorposts, and then the great escape down to the crossing of the Red Sea, and eventually 40 years in the wilderness. And there they got the 10 Commandments, and eventually they arrived at the Promised Land. Hooray! And there Joshua crossed over the Jordan, and Joshua fought the Battle of Jericho, Jericho, Jericho. Joshua fought the Battle of Jericho, and the walls came a-tumbling down. And they had an amazing time when they were in the Promised Land, the land that God had promised them would be full of milk and honey, a wonderful place to be. And yet they didn't stick to God's promises. And after Joshua died, I'm afraid they turned back to a whole lot of evil ways, and they worshipped other gods, and they didn't keep God's laws. And they ended up being absolutely grinding poverty, being virtually slaves to all the Midianites and the people from the east who came crowding into their land. So God gave them a series of judges. And what does a judge do? He's somebody very wise, somebody who knows how things ought to be done properly. And whenever they had the judges, the people turned back to God and worshipped him again, and things went well. I think the first of these judges was a woman. She was called Deborah. And my goodness, she was a feisty character. But the next one we come to is this one here. Let's have to fill in the name of the book, haven't we? It's all in this big book. In the book of Judges. And this particular judge, his name was should we read it together? His name was Gideon. Now, Gideon was the son of a really good man, and he worshipped God, probably one of the few who did. And they were complaining to God. They said, Lord, what have we done? You rescued us out of Egypt, and yet here we are with hardly anything to eat, because as soon as we sow the ground or we put our sheep out onto the pasture, along come the Midianites, and they take everything and they destroy everything, and we're starving hungry. So what Gideon was doing was actually threshing what corn they had been able to grow in a secret place. They made caverns, and they made fortresses, and they made places that they could be secretly keeping their food away from the Midianites. And an angel appeared to Gideon, and he was very afraid, very, very afraid. And the angel of God said to him, "You're going to rescue my people." And Gideon said, "Oh no, you've got the wrong man there. No. I mean, my tribe is the smallest tribe in Israel, and I'm the runt of the litter. I'm no good. I couldn't possibly do that." God said, "I say you will rescue your people. You are a mighty man of valour." And Gideon thought, "Oh no, I'm not. I couldn't do it." So he said, just wait a minute. Let me go and get you a present. So he went and he prepared a meal from his scanty stores, and he brought the food out to the angel and set it in front of him. And the angel said, "Put it on that rock over there," and set fire to it. The whole thing went up in flames, and Gideon was terrified because he thought he had seen God and that he would be bound to die. God said to him, "No, you're to gather your soldiers together, and you are going to defeat the Midianites with me as if it was just one man. So Gideon thought, right, well, I suppose I'd better try. So he sent out messages to all his people, and I'll tell you how many came together. 32,000 people turned up, soldiers, to help him fight the Midianites. And so Gideon began to feel a bit braver. He thought, yeah, we can do this. And God said, no, that won't do. You've got far too many people there. If I let you win against the Midianites with all those people, they'll all say, oh, we did that. They won't give the glory to me, and I'm going to win this battle for you. You tell them, anybody who's a bit scared or a bit anxious about this, to tell them to go home. We don't need them. So Gideon thought, oh, well, all right then. So he said to them, if any of you are scared and you don't really want to fight this battle, please go home, because God says we'll manage without you. So how many people left? 22,000 of them left. Wow. And that reduced his numbers down to 10,000. So he said to God, well, how about this then? And God said to him, no, you've still got too many. You could easily overcome the Midianites with 10,000. I'll tell you what, God said, I know you're unsure about this, so I'll give you another sign. Go down to the stream with the men you've got left and get them to have a good drink, and watch how they drink. And he said, if they put their faces in the water and suck up the water from the stream, send them home. But if they get the water in their hands and still keep a lookout and lap it up from their hands like that, those are the ones you want. Okay? So that's what Gideon did. And sure enough, he wasn't left with 10,000 people anymore. He was left with just 300 men. And down in the valley, there were thousands of Midianites. And they had so many camels, they were like grains of sand, thousands of them. And Gideon thought to himself, am I really going to do this with 300 men? And so he said, look, Lord, I'm sorry to say this, but please, could you just give me a sign? I'll tell you what, I'll put this fleece out on the threshing floor, and in the morning, if the fleece is wet, but all the ground around it is dry, then I'll know that you mean business. So God said, yes, all right then. So Gideon carefully put the fleece out on the threshing floor, and in the morning he could wring it out. A basin full of water came out of it, but all around the ground around it was dry. Oh, he thought, well, it could be just coincidence. It could be. So he said again to God, just one more time, Lord, please. Only this time, when I put the fleece out, if the fleece is dry and the ground around it is wet, then I will really be reassured that that's what you really want me to do. So God said, well, all right then, just this once. And so he put out the fleece, and in the morning, when he woke up and looked at it, the fleece was dry as a bone, and all around it, the ground was wet with dew. So Gideon thought, right, I haven't got any choice now, I've got to do this. And he realised that the thing you have to do is listen to what God says. And so he listened, and eventually he obeyed. And he divided his men up into 3 companies of 100. And he gave them each a jar, a big pitcher, a clay jar, and in it was a torch. And he gave them each a trumpet. And he said, look, I'm going down just to the camp now, just to scout things out, just to have a quick look. But when I come back, you be ready. And so he went down. God had told him to go down with his servant. Better give him some heads, hadn't I? Because it was dark, night time, middle of the night. And they went down. And just as they got near the camp, with all these hundreds and hundreds of tents and camels and things, they overheard one of the Midianite soldiers saying to another one, "I've had this horrible dream. It was awful. A great big barley loaf rolled into the camp and squashed the tent flat." And his friend said, oh, that's terrible. That's a sign. That means that the Israelites, that Gideon's army is going to come and squash us all flat. Oh dear, that's terrible. And so Gideon thought, right. And he went back up the hill and he got his men ready with their jars and they have the jars in their left hands and the trumpets in their right. And he said, right, follow me. He said, and when we get to the edge of the camp, one set of you here and one set on the right and one set on the left, keep together. And when you see me, do what I do, okay? So they said, yes, sir. And they went creeping down the hill, clutching their trumpets and their jars. And when they got to the bottom, Gideon smashed his jar and in it took the torch in his left hand and he blew on his trumpet. Can you imagine 300 of those going? And all the Midianites who'd just gone to bed were absolutely terrified. And Gideon shouted, "For the Lord and for Gideon!" And he charged down there. And they were blowing their trumpets and waving their torches. And the Midianites were so terrified, they came up and they were running in sixes and sevens. They didn't know how to get out of the camp. They were fighting each other. They were killing each other. And so Gideon didn't have to do anything but blow their trumpets and wave those torches. And they did a wonderful victory. And afterwards they were so thrilled and so relieved. And some of his people who hadn't come to fight said, "Well, why didn't you tell us? We'd have chased after them." And Gideon said, "No, we didn't need to. Because if we have God with us, we don't say I can't. With God with us, we say I can." And in the New Testament of the Bible, there's a verse which said, if God is for us, who can be against us? And that's something to remember. Perhaps if you're being bullied at school, or perhaps if there's some big awful situation that you can't handle. Remember Gideon. Remember that Gideon relied on God and he listened to him and he obeyed him. He did what God would do. And so it was a most amazing victory, and written down in those 2 chapters of Judges. There's lots more exciting stories in that book as well. And I'll tell you another one next time. So God bless you and thank you for listening. And remember that if we listen to God and obey him, we'll win through. We'll come out on top.